chaos. So that's mostly what it feels like.
Like the combination of family, work, everything, I'm
Oh
guessing.
yeah. Well, as you guys know, I have three very young children. So I'd say even if I had no job, I think my life would be chaos. Whether or not I was managing it, I don't know. But yes, I think between that and work being something of nonstop, it's quite chaos all the time.
Well, all good things
Yeah,
though.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Managed chaos is the great. It's invigorating. Is the greatest. Now, I am. Yeah, I don't know your situation, James, in terms of
I was gonna say.
first person wise, but I do love managed chaos as a
Well,
general
I've
concept.
said many a time that I'd rather be busy than bored. What sometimes I think I could probably be a little bored once in a while, but I like to have a lot going
Yeah,
on.
Is it funny though that you like the moment you get bored and you're like, this is nice for like 2 seconds, and then like you just can't wait to get back on the horse for something,
Oh yeah,
right? Like you.
I'll I'll never forget. So before I started Torii, I Julia, who for anybody who doesn't know, my wife and I we quit our jobs. I sold my house and we took a couple of months off, and which included a road trip around the country, and we did some other travel as well. But it did not take long before I was like, I need to work. I was like, I like my mind just starts spinning. So yes, I can certainly relate.
yeah, man, you're a problem solver, which leads us here,
I
and
well doing my
and
best.
obviously the start of Tory, will not. We're here for real reports, but James founding multiple companies, we're here as a result. So it's a great place to be. But yeah, let's start. Let's dig in on real reports. We got a half hour. Um, let's start with because you have always been focused on the data aspect of the real estate industry and bringing it out of sort of more ancient times to the present day. So, yeah, let's get your first thoughts on real reports and basically like what is going on now? Like, where are you taking this company? What problem are you solving at the moment with that?
Yeah, well, I know that this is less about Tory, but I think it's important to share some context for the history because yeah, I think to your point about that I've always been excited about data, especially in the real estate space. And a big part of why we started Tory was you guys know the story, but my story, which the quick and dirty version of it is, we were buying a house and our agent what was not helpful. I ended up without electricity at a home in the mountains in New Hampshire in the middle of the winter, and ended up being quite a memorable night trying to keep a house from freezing with a campfire and having a propane stove and lanterns and bottled water and whatnot. But it was really frustrating experience when in that case we did a lot of the work and ended up really not getting help and felt and feeling stuck. Now we started Tory to change that and bring data and tech, but also with like a strong human touch and amazing agents, because obviously there are a lot of those out there to bring that together. And data was a big part of that too, to say, look, we're going to empower agents. Agents are so good at so many things, but let's empower them with more technology. And I think some of that ended up evolving into real reports with, a related but similar story where once again, my wife and I were buying a house, this time in California, and I ended up getting rejected by 10 insurance companies for wildfire risk. I didn't buy that home. I live back in New Hampshire now, but it was this real shock. And that was, wow, I knew how real estate worked because I was working with Tori. I mean, I knew how the transaction worked. I knew a lot about real estate data, but I just didn't have the right stuff in front of me at the
Hmm.
right time. And in that case, I almost lost a massive deposit on this home. Fortunately, because I work in the space, I was able to get out of it. But one, that was just a really scary,
Mm.
jarring experience. But it really led me to say, we need to fix that. We need to make it so that whatever question somebody has, because if you're buying a home in Boston, wildfire risk is not one of your top priorities in evaluating a home. But there are a lot of other things that might be, and a lot of times those are just hard. Whatever that question you have may be, it's a lot of them just hard to answer it. And we really set out to go be able to answer any question that somebody has about any property in the United States in seconds. Now, we make that available to real estate agents who share it with their consumers. So if you are interested in getting one, you can go talk to somebody like you guys who is able to provide you the real
Hmm.
report. But it's a great way to work with your agent to be able to learn anything about a property in basically real time without having to go dig around town hall or make phone calls or go to 10 or
Yeah.
20 different websites to piece that information together.
So yeah, let's get into that. Like, how are you gathering that information, and how are you um, uh, evaluating the accuracy of said information? Like, how much into the weeds do you get from multiple sources of that information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we get data from over 60 different places, and some of those places get data from thousands of places. So in effect, I mean, the data is coming from a lot of different places. But a big part of what the technology does is not only deliver that in a nice package. I mean, I didn't say this before, but probably the easiest way to think about it's like Carfax for homes. I mean, you're sitting in a car that you may have pulled a Carfax for before you bought it, and I think most people are familiar with that idea. We think about it that way just because I think it puts people in the right frame of mind. It's like, well, we have that for cars. Why don't we have that for houses? So we've really tried to build this into a comprehensive version of that. But in doing so, obviously it means data. We need data from a lot of different
Mhm.
places. In our case, we've lost count. I mean, there's so many different data sources, but a lot of what the technology does is make sure that that data is reliable, and in that some of that means redundancy. I mean, if you're thinking about, it's funny for you guys, how important this is, but to the person, to somebody who doesn't think about real estate every day or maybe doesn't work in it, they might think, oh, square footage, like that's an obvious number. That should be an agreed upon value for every home. Like, why is there a dispute? I happen to know that you might look up four different sources and it might say four different square footages for the same property.
Yep.
We do a lot on our side to cure that data, to make sure it's redundant, to make sure there's agreement. We have a really complex system on the back end that ranks providers and says, okay, for this type of data, who do we want this from? If they fail and they don't have it, where do we get it from after that? And waterfall that. So there's a lot of work on the back end to make sure that before that shows up in this nice, pretty package where it's really usable, we make sure that it's reliable beforehand. Now, I think it's important to note that, like I said, you get this through your real estate agent. So before a consumer sees it, the real estate agent sees it. And what that means is the real estate agent gets an opportunity to say, I'm going to add my own expertise, my own color on top of this.
Mhm.
I'm going to add notes. I'm going to reorder it. I'm going to highlight the things that are really important and I know are important to you because I don't know that agent's client, but the agent does. So they get to help understand that property and be the leading voice
Yeah.
there. But in our case, we want to empower the agent to be able to tell that story.
I have a couple questions on that, James.
Saad,
So
Saad, real quick. What's up to Azimi Muhammad? Sheed, thanks for joining. Laz, good to see you.
you,
Hey,
you know Azimi Muhammad is Isa, right?
I did. No, I did. Hey, Issa.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for joining.
everyone.
So James, so real quick so obviously, 60 different sources, thousands effectively of different like sources within those sources, right? So like there's tons of information that comes in. Naturally there's going to be stuff like that are like the specs of the property and permits and like zoning and things like that. Are there like, when you say Carfax for homes, like what would you say are like some of like the unique things that come in this report that like you really can't find anywhere else?
Well, as you can imagine, I've shown a real report to an awful lot of people, and I always laugh when people laugh at the end of it because, I'll go through it, and it's a very, very long report. We try and make it a nice package, but you guys have seen an awful lot of them. You go through it and you realize, oh, there's like an overwhelming amount of data
Yeah.
in here. So I think it's, I get asked questions like that, and I think it's a hard question to answer because I think what's most interesting depends on your use case. And my example in California was that I couldn't get wildfire insurance. So I think in that case, we have a lot of risk and climate related
Right.
data. It's like, is this in a flood zone? Is there a wetland in the backyard? Which some of those are very relevant to New England as well. I
Mhm.
mean, a lot of people don't want to live where a wetland is 5 feet from their backyard.
Yeah, I
And
had one last year. Yeah,
yeah,
we had a.
so I mean, and Mike, we know a story of somebody who wanted to build a pool, and I was like, well,
Hmm.
actually, that's too close to wetland.
Yep.
It turns out that now you've got a product where you click one button, and you're like, okay, there's the wetland, there's the national forest nearby because I want to be able to recreate there, and it turns out this abuts 3,000 acres of conservation land. But other times it's, to your example, is the permit history. I want to know when they replaced the roof. I want to know, what is the condition of this property. Sometimes you want to know, maybe you're an investor and there's data like short-term rental data to figure out what are the comps for that nearby, because that's, again, real estate agents, turns out there's a lot of data like that real estate agents may have access to figure out if you want to go put this on Airbnb, how does that compare? But that data is kind of hard to find. And then we'll actually have comps for that to say, how much could you expect to rent this for on Airbnb? Not just how much could you rent this for monthly if you have a 12-month lease with somebody, but how much could you rent it for nightly on Airbnb? So it really depends on your use case, but we try to make it very comprehensive. Sometimes you want to know where the closest grocery store is that does pickup and delivery. I mean, it's like, so, that data is in there. And one of the things that we've done on top of that is we understand that can be an overwhelming amount of data, but we built a really cool AI copilot. We call it Aiden, where instead of even having to scroll through the report to find it, which of course you can do, and we try to make that easy, now you can actually just ask a question. Now, when you ask a question, Aiden goes and finds the answer in the report for you. And it's important to note, it's not going to make up an answer. It's using the data that's in the report, but it saves you time because it's pulling from all those different sections to say, all right, well, if you did want to short-term rent this, first I need to look at the zoning data to figure out, are you allowed to do that? And now I need to figure out, all right, is it worth it in that area? And then combine all these different pieces to say, all right, well, and also like, let's compare that to the weather in January. It turns out like, what's going on around there? Are people actually going to rent that and for how much and when?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, that is fantastic to have to be hyper specific like that. My so I This is not a real report specific question. This is more in a general, like, if you're looking at a Zestimate, Redfin estimate, estimates in real reports, I don't think anyone really delves into, like, where does that number come from? What are the inputs that this particular algorithm is sourcing from, to give that, and how it adjusts? So could you do you have knowledge or insight into that sort of, like, basically how is that constructed? Because it's a math problem in a way.
In my world, we call those AVMs. It's an automated valuation model. And it's a great question, Mike, but the real answer is none of those companies will tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's with good reason. It's because if they told you, then somebody else would just go build the exact same thing and they'd come up with a similar number as their valuation. But all of those are proprietary algorithms where they say, well, here's how we say that this home is worth $612,000. Somebody else that says it's worth 640. I mean, they generally aren't going to tell you. I can tell you a lot of the generalized inputs. It's recent sales and area data
Of
and how the
course.
market's performing
Yes.
and what does this home look like. But as far as specifics, it's generally going to be proprietary. Now, our approach to that is twofold. One, the first thing that when an agent uses a real report, when they create it for their client, first thing we do is ask them what their opinion evaluation is, because you guys know this. You probably sold the home next door. I mean, you know the neighborhood better than any computer is ever going to know it. I don't care how good the computer is. You as an agent know what you already know the fabric of that neighborhood, and you know that someone down the hall in this multifamily building just sold or wants to sell next month. The computer doesn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing we do is ask the agent what they think, because it's our opinion that the agent is the real expert. But what we do, as soon as you scroll down past that in a report, we might show you 8 or 10 different valuations. We don't actually make one ourselves, because
That's
what we do is say, agent, what do you think? You're the expert. But we support that with 8 or 10 different valuations from various sources that we work with, because we want to really empower that agent to say, like, I think it's worth $635,000. And here's why. And I'm going to add my color to that. I'm going to explain to you why I think that's true. I use these comps. I did this research for you. But let's look at what 8 different computers thought to compare that and say, look, there is a really tight clustering around that. Here's why I think it's a little bit lower than that because of the market. Or maybe I think it's higher because you renovated that bathroom and nobody else knows about that yet.
Yeah.
But it's really the nexus of the agent's expertise with as much data as you can empower them with.
Awesome. Great answer. And I have thought about this for some time of, is a Zestimate or a Redfin estimate or whatever, if it's seen by the public enough, is it almost a self-fulfilling prophecy sometime? Could you be so, in a competitive market, could you as the buyer be so influenced to expect it to be up into that number? It's just there might not be an answer, but it's just something that I think about of,
I
like,
thought of that too,
social
Mike.
psychology.
I think unfortunately that's probably more true than most people would want to think it is. But I think that's why we look. You guys know, I'm a licensed broker myself. We've all dealt with the question of, well, what about this estimate? And where somebody's saying, again, we've all dealt with this time and again, where it based on that, your own expertise, you say, we should really list this home at 699. But then somebody said, well, the Zestimate says it's worth 740, and then somebody said, well, okay, and sometimes the Zestimate says it's worth 800. So you say, all right, fine, we'll list at 775 because and then turns out it sells for 695, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, it turns out the agent knows the market because they sold the home next door and they watch
Right.
they watch the MLS and they see what's happening and they just know better. But to your point, I think it's self-fulfilling insofar as it's understandably most people have a very different job than we all do. They don't think about real estate all the time. They think about real estate when it's most important to them, other than maybe scrolling when they're killing time on Zillow or whatever. But they think about it because like I need to buy a home right now. And so now I'm going to get serious about that. I'm going to sell my home, and how much equity do I have? That's when they think about it most, which understandably is an emotional process. If you work in this job, it becomes less emotional. So if you're thinking about it unemotionally, you just look at the data and say, look, this is most likely based on my expertise what this is worth. And I think it's a lot easier to think about it that way. But if somebody doesn't have that expertise, because why would they?
Mhm.
Then the easiest number for them to see is this estimate or the Redfin estimate. But that's why they need to work with a real estate agent to understand. Yeah, those are just numbers. Like those are, and they might be directionally correct, but it doesn't mean it's the actual selling price of the home because that's what the market will determine.
Mhm.
And you
I
do that
think
with the help of
to
the real estate agent.
that point, James, like and like Mike, to your question, like it's public, and I think to when people think about that, when people think about like, oh, everybody can see that number, like that kind of does something to your brain,
Yeah.
right? Like anybody who's interested in your property or other people that might be interested in a property that you're interested in, they can quickly just look up the address, and the first thing that pops up is a Zillow,
Yeah.
right? So you click on that link, and you're going to see that number. So naturally, it's going to do something in terms of the neurons in your brain to kind of make you feel a certain way. So I definitely think that there's some like psychological impact that is as wrong as those numbers often are, right? There's a psychological
Well,
impact
look,
that it has.
it's very common in behavioral economics, but anchoring, right?
Yeah.
Like somebody sees that, and that if they see, even if this home is worth 700, as soon as they see a number that says 500, it says 900, then they're like, well, I saw that number. So in their head, that's their base point. And now trying to get them back to 700, which might be the right number, is even that much harder because they've been anchored at something different.
Yes.
But again, I do think that that's when it's really important to work with somebody that thinks about this all day long, every day, and has done it a whole lot to say, all right, help me maybe unanchor from that point to figure out what reality is.
Yeah, I want to share quickly so a couple of things. One, a personal story. Like I used. So obviously, I work in this industry, but I don't work in Texas, right? So like obviously, I have access to tons of data in Massachusetts and what have you. But even in Massachusetts, I've had a lot of clients who've leveraged real reports. But as an investor, I was looking at properties in Texas, and a real report. I mean, the data at the very top is the valuation data, right? And you get that information was super powerful for me when it came to evaluating as an investor whether I was getting a good deal or not on a property. So I think if this is not just if you're a buyer or a seller, like even as something as simple like I mean getting a deal is like paramount as an investor is probably the most important thing you think about. So just simply for that purpose, I mean, obviously there's a lot more, but just simply for that purpose, it was extremely powerful for me and my partner, my business partner, as we were trying to evaluate that particular transaction a couple of years ago. So, and I think, I think that was like right when Real Reports like just started kind of shipping out these reports, and now it's gotten even more powerful.
Well,
So
and Saad, since you've shared that story with me before, if I recall correctly, I think you beat 16 or 17 other offers and actually got that property as an investment.
yeah, and it was and so we went above the asking price. It was not properly listed at all. But there was a lot going on. There's a lot going on with with that property, which is a story for another day.
Mhm.
But exactly right. I mean, there were 16, 17 other offers, and yeah, we were the 17th, and they didn't have access to that data, and that was the one reason we decided to. That data that we saw was the reason that we decided to up our offer to make sure that we won. And now fast forward 2 years later, just to talk real numbers, each of those properties that we purchased is worth $220,000 more than each individually is worth $220,000 more than what we paid for it.
That's awesome. Good for you.
So,
No way. That's amazing.
so,
Yeah.
so I mean, like again, like that was kind of like the what we needed. That was the data that we needed to push us to that level. So I highly recommend everybody use it. But I mean, I think if you're an investor, there's special information there, especially since I mean, for us it was like it wasn't a Zestimate. It was like real data from multiple different sources, and it helped us really kind of inform our strategy in a very competitive situation. So one other thing I want to mention too was I get asked a lot, and Mike, I know you do too, about renos, right? So, like I forgot, and then maybe James, you can help kind of explain where you get that data from. But that data around, like people always wonder, oh, if I do this to my house, like my particular house, right? How is that going to impact ROI? Can you explain, like, number one, is that something that like a lot of subscribers and agents are using and asking about? Are you getting feedback on that one? I would imagine the answer is yes, but I'm just curious, like, what kind of feedback you're getting on that one, and also any kind of like pulling behind the curtain, like looking behind the curtain, I should say, like, how does that even work?
Yeah, well, so a lot of questions all in one. Let me try and get. So first of all, I would say yes, people use it and they're excited about it. I would say what goes into it is some mix of market data and analysis across various properties that are similar, and figuring out if they redid the kitchen, how much did that value go up when they did that. So there are a lot of different data sources that can go into that. When you ask do people use it, this is sort of what I was saying before. I think it really depends on your use case, because there are going to be some people, they pull a real report and they're like, this is a brand new home. I don't care about the renovation
Right.
potential.
Yeah.
So is it used every time? No, of course not. But when you need it, you really need it. Because you're like, well, I'm buying a flip, and I'm going to gut this thing, and I need to understand, or maybe it's polish it up a little bit and figure out which of these projects might add enough value for this to be worth it. So, the idea is when you need that answer, it is available. Now, I would encourage, one thing people may not know is that Mike and Saad and the whole team at Torii, they can always provide a real report to every one of their clients. So if you are a client that is working with you guys and already wants to see one of these, just ask. Or, maybe you're somebody who's thinking about who you should work with. It's this is a team that really does care about data and makes, and wants to help their clients make empowered decisions. So whether that's renovating a home, or it's thinking about a rental, or it's thinking about, like you said, the permit history, or you want to look at 8 or 10 valuations to measure that against. Yeah, I know you guys care about data, so I would encourage anybody to ask when they need that.
James, is it a living report now? I know that there was some effort to get it. Like, does it update kind of like, in over months or
It
years? Or
doesn't, for an important reason. I mean, we want you to be able to have a point in time report. So
yes.
you could actually go get another report, and it's partly because you don't want stale data. We want it when you go click and you type in an address and click to get a real report, we'll go check. I said 60, but really, because some of those it's much more. We might go hit 100, 200 different things all at once, right, when you type that in. So we want it to be as fresh and as current as possible. Now, if you go do that again, it will redo that. So you can compare those to say, well, here's my report on this home from 6 months ago. And that's another thing I would say. If you're somebody listening and maybe you work with these guys and you already own your home, maybe you're thinking about selling it, or you just want to learn more about it, then even in my own house, I always find it really interesting to look at the report. There's so many things in building this product with our team, I've learned so much about my own home and the area. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that part of the land did this, or that, oh, that's interesting that somebody got rejected for a permit a while ago, and now I know the story around that. So I'd say even if you're thinking about selling a home, or maybe it's a 5 years from now thing. It's like, so to your point, it's kind of interesting when you say, well, here's the real report from a year ago, and here's the real report on that same property from now, and you can look at them side by side.
That actually reminds me of something that we need to get back to planning out, is an annual real report for our clients that have closed, Mike.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put that down.
I thought you were going to say like a real reports party and just have like everything scrolling on like projection screens and
That
whatnot.
could be fun too.
Mike's mind always goes to parties.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Sounds like, how do I help clients? And Mike's like, can we have a good time?
It's, drum and bass is the only way I can think. So
Yeah. Shut down with
I'm
that.
automatically.
Oh man, so good. Um, Before, I know we only got a few minutes left, but definitely, again, to James' point, if you're interested in getting a real report on a property that you're interested, and again, not just in Massachusetts, anywhere around the country, right? Uh, Reach out to Mike and I. We can help you with that. Absolutely. If you're a buyer, seller, or investor, right? Like investors as well, like it's very important, like to have as much information as possible. Reach out to us. If you're an agent or a broker and you want it for your team, like reach out to James. James, how does somebody in that camp reach out to the Real Reports team? Obviously, you have your website and what have you, but what's the best way to reach out?
Sure. Yeah. Anybody can go to realreports.ai. That's the website. Any agent could go sign up and try it out. Depending on where you are in the country, there's decent chance you might have access to it through your MLS. But anybody can always just email me, james@realreports.ai. Happy to get in touch and chat about it and explain more about the product if anybody's curious.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Any
it's
last thoughts, Mike?
it's just very cool how this evolves, but there's always like uh like a checker of the information. It's right, like don't follow stuff blindly, but things get more accurate and they get the more access we have to things, the more we can kind of synthesize that information and be of use to clients.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, look, there's all types of data that's available out there. I mean, the crux of this whole message and this whole live is like, make it easy on yourself. Like, all this information is in one place. You can spend
Mm-hmm.
hours, days, if not weeks, trying to gather all this information. Now it could be in front of you in seconds. So, no brainer.
Yeah,
And obviously, reach out to us if you have more questions or if you need a report.
Excellent. Thanks,
that,
guys.
that's it. Congrats, James. First IG Live.
Yeah, first one. I haven't opened Instagram in a while. It's
Yeah.
nice to be back.
Now, yeah, you go clean up those messages and whatnot.
Yeah, I
But
think I got some things to attend to.
yeah,
Yeah, those
yeah.
DMs, fun. There are a lot of notifications in there. It's been a while.
That's fun.
All right.
And that's nice to feel wanted. Thank you, James.
I
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Saad.
Thanks, guys.
I'm
This was
Mike.
fun.
Another story time in the books.
All right.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
guys.
Have a good week.
See ya.
Bye.